Welcome to the Alchemy of Business Show with your host, Steve Rodgers. The Alchemy of Business Show is a podcast that mixes practical, actionable business solutions with soulful insights for anyone seeking deeper meaning in their lives and greater success in their work. Steve will be featuring purpose-driven leaders from all walks of life and getting insight into their journeys from failures to triumphs. So tune in to transition, transform, and evolve in every dimension of your business and life. And now your host of the Alchemy of Business Show, Steve Rodgers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Whether you are listening on iTunes through audio version, or maybe you're on video, you're watching this on Roku or YouTube, however you got here, thank you for being on the show, The Alchemy of Business. We are always taking time to pause and talk with leaders who are helping us make wiser decisions, finding ways to create higher profits and abundance in our life, and also finding higher purpose in our life. And this guest that I have today, I'm thrilled to have on. I have a lot of history with this guy. I know him back in the days from probably 25 or more years ago when he was pounding the pavement being a real estate agent, and not just a real estate agent, but a top of the list real estate agent we're going to talk about. Mr. Chris Heller, who we have on the show today, has had a phenomenal career. Talk about a guy that transitions and transforms and reinvents himself. He really is become an industry icon. He's a thought leader. He's a two-time CEO of a very large operations. He formerly was the CEO of Keller Williams' entire operation, nationally and internationally. This is one of the largest franchises in the country, doing more transactions than any other company in history. He was running that as the CEO. He then went on to be involved in being the CEO of Mellohome, where he was the chief executive officer in 2018. And he is known to have this very driven, charismatic kind of leadership because he's got this extraordinary ability to help keep teams together by his own example. He's a very disciplined guy who really knows how to have processes that work and still keep a human touch. Currently, Chris has now stepped into more of the tech world of real estate, and he's the chief real estate officer of Ojo Labs. And this is where he's shaping partnerships and strategies with other brokerages and entities within the United States and pulling them together, and so that real estate professionals and consumers can have a better way to communicate using AI, using human touch, and using expertise and making sure that the consumer gets what they want. So I'm thrilled to have Mr. Chris Heller on the show. Chris, welcome.
Thanks, Steve. Hey, you did that pretty good. I think you nailed everything.
Oh, great. Well, thanks. Well, glad to have you on the show. Like I said, I mean, I remember being in Prudential in the Encinitas office back and walking in and literally seeing you. You were one of the first guys to have stand-up calling booths, and you had your team like on regiments. And I would walk in, and some agents would be at the coffee machine, and some agents would be talking, and some agents would kind of be strolling around, and some would be doing business. You were like a machine. You were just like committed and driven, and you knew what you needed to do. So let's tell the viewers, how did you get into real estate in the first place? And how did you become so successful in real estate, literally becoming one of the top in the country and then top globally as well? So let's talk about your journey in that space first, and then I'm going to reflect on some of the other things you did along that way.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just texting last night with the guy who got me into real estate. I got talked into getting into real estate. That's how I got into it. I had met a broker who, for 3 years, this is before text messages. So for 3 years, would write me notes, would call me every time.
Handwritten format, yes.
Handwritten format. He would call me. Every time I saw him, he'd try to get me to come and join him. And I was in between. I had just shut down a company. I was just about to start back up again. I went to meet with him about leasing some space, and he said, and then he gave me the pitch again. And I think he just caught me at a weak moment. I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And that was I joined him in November. This was November of 1988. And in 1989, I was Rookie of the Year in San Diego and had sold 27 homes. And in November of 88, when I joined him, I didn't know anything about real estate. I mean, I owned a townhome. I bought a townhome when I was 20 years old. And so I knew what real estate was, but I had no idea about real estate sales and what was involved.
So what do you think you had, or what ecosystem were you in, or the environment that allowed you at that young age to become Rookie of the Year, not knowing much about real estate except of buying a piece? What components existed in that year or two first that allowed you to excel versus someone else?
Yeah, so there was one thing that that I still have, that I had then, and that was that burning desire and the willingness to do whatever it took. That year, Steve, I literally worked 7 days a week. He was a former Marine who used to get in like at 6:30 or 7. I made sure I was the first one there, so I'd get in at like 6 or 6:30. I was always the last one to leave that office at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. I worked as much as anyone could humanly work that first year because I knew I didn't have the knowledge, the skills, the personality, the intelligence. I didn't have anything. All I knew is I could work hard. So it was just sort of blood, sweat, and tears in that first year. But in that first year, I then learned a lot that allowed me to even grow bigger and faster and not have to work as much after that.
And then during that path, when you started selling this house and making these commissions, before that, what were you doing? What were you doing to be able to afford to buy a townhome at 20 years old? Because I remember it vaguely. Didn't you own laundromats or something, or coin operated something?
That came later, and
that came later. Okay,
and I still own that.
Okay.
No, when I was a sophomore in college, my dad called me and said, "Hey, you're going to get your real estate license and come up to Lake Tahoe and work for the summer." And he was managing a timeshare resort. So I said, okay. And I went up there, and then halfway through the summer, he got an opportunity to go to San Diego and manage a resort. And so I went with him, and I started selling timeshares. Now, I was as shy and introverted as anyone could be. Through my first 2 years of college, I never took a class where you had to give a presentation. In fact, I rarely talk about this, but I after 2 years full time, I then went another like 5 or 6 years of part time because I was working selling timeshares, and I took classes at night. But I would never take a class where you had to give a presentation because I couldn't do it. I couldn't do that. Now, what's interesting is I could meet with a husband and wife and do a 90-minute presentation. Didn't have a problem with that, but in groups it was super uncomfortable. So I was selling timeshares. I got very good at it. I was so different than the rest of the timeshare people. I was a young guy. The rest of them were, came from different industries like car sales and things like that. And, but I got good at it. And after 3 years, I just actually got burnt out. It's the one time in my life that I have ever experienced that, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do another presentation of that type. And so then I went to work for a marketing company. And so for the next 3 years, I either worked at or owned a marketing company in the timeshare industry, marketing for timeshare resorts. And that's where I met this real estate broker who ultimately convinced me to get into residential real estate.
Got it. So those skills were all adaptable. I remember when I was in the hotel restaurant industry before I got in real estate. And I think I got in real estate when I was like 26 or 27. But I remembered it was such a phenomenal training ground for customer service, long hours, multitasking, anticipating what people needed, making people happy. And when I said, okay, I'm going to raise my price point from steaks and wines to condos and houses, it was a big jump. But it was amazing how much of that was adaptable. So it sounds like you took what you learned in the timeshare stuff, or even obviously some of the stuff you took in college, and adapted it over. And in the real estate space, you were also a little different than many salespeople. If you walk into a real estate office, they're very, they're kind of like sometimes loud and outgoing and gregarious and kind of more party kind of oriented and kind of but they're not always good business people, and they're sometimes not as analytical, or they don't always have the business acumen, but they have this personality. You were this guy that everyone sometimes, Chris, was surprised at how much you continued to increase year after year after year, because you just did it different than others, and you just knew what your lane was. So it's kind of like the tortoise and the hare. How do you describe yourself if you were to put yourself in one of those categories? Are you more like the tortoise or the hare?
If you look at my career, you'd probably it's kind of a hybrid, but most people would say it looked more like the tortoise, because I was just super consistent and super persistent and just kept going and going when most people, burned out or flamed out or gave up. It was, naturally I'm by nature, I'm analytical, my mind just works that way. And so it was easy for me to take almost a common sense approach to a business where most people didn't, and know that, hey, if I follow this schedule or if I did these activities, I would get the results, versus flying by the seat of my pants, which is what
Right,
most
right.
agents tend
Somebody
to
too,
do
yes.
or tended to
Yeah.
do. So it was a little easier for me from that standpoint. But I also, I didn't have any choices. Like when I got into real estate, I had just gotten married, like in August of that year, and this was going to be like what I was going to do, and I really approached it like I had no other option, and I was going to just be the best that I could be, and that's always been my goal.
Well, and you have that drive. Do you think drive in people is something you're either born with or you don't have it? Like an internal hunger for drive? Because you're a very driven person. And I'm just curious you've come to believe now at this point in your life. You've seen a lot of people, a lot of salespeople, a lot of leaders. Is drive inbred, or can you learn drive?
I think Steve, that there's things that happen that contribute to it in a big way, and usually when you're kids, right? With there's events that happen when we're kids, and that sort of shapes us or causes us to go in a certain direction. Whether that was there when you're born, I don't think so. I have 4 kids, and I've seen lots of babies, and when you see all those babies laying in the nursery in the hospital, you can't tell which ones have drive and which ones don't. So it's probably a combination. I mean, there's some that's maybe inherent in who the person is, but I also think you're largely shaped by events that happen in your life that either catapult you in one direction or another.
Yeah. Well, you definitely had that drive, and everyone that was someone said, "Boy, that guy is driven." And you put blinders on, and you knew what you were doing. And at the time, this is when cold calling was very, very, very predominant. And now in this day and age, with being able to block calls and not no call lists, it's a different way of doing business, which is part of we're going to talk about later, how you evolved into tech and how you talked into and AI and different marketing strategies. But at the time, that was something a lot of people couldn't do. They couldn't handle the rejection. They couldn't handle people saying no to them. And it's interesting you've gone on to write this book we're going to talk about in a little bit, called Dominant Thoughts. But back then, and you had this guy who was this military guy who was disciplined and, probably was that, military kind of, tough kind of exterior. So how did you, in your early days, for anybody that's listening in that is dealing with rejection now, whether it's rejections of contracts not getting signed, deals that aren't coming together, relationships that aren't working, where there's this, and you have to keep going of rejection. How did you get through that? Because there had to be a lot of it.
Yeah, well, there was. I'll tell you where there was a lot of it, and that was in selling timeshares. And there's 2 things that I think I greatly benefited from while I was doing that. One was massive rejection, and now again, because of my natural personality style, I'm not. Introverted people aren't as impacted by what people think. I think when you're very sociable and very everything else, it really matters to you what people think about you, and my goals were always way more important to me than what someone thought about me. Now, do I want to be a good person? And of course, but I wasn't going to be run by, whether people liked me or not, or said yes or no to me. And if they said no, I wasn't going to take that personally and be crushed and everything else. So, handling rejection was a little easier for me for those 2 reasons. And then the discipline just came from watching all the other agents. And I was in an office with 60 or 70 agents. I was new, I was young, and watching what they were doing and pretty much just trying to do the opposite, because I didn't see any of them like getting great results, and I wanted to get great results.
And isn't it funny when you do something different than what other people want or expect you to do, the resistance you get from that? I even remember at the time when I was in my mature leadership about that, talking to managers about, this agent just won't do this, or they won't come to our meeting, or they won't do this. And I remember you were one of those people. It was like, you said, look, this is my business. I'm a CEO of my own company. I'm an independent contractor. I'm going to run a business, and you always hit your numbers or exceeded them. But you were not you didn't just go with the flow because everyone else did it. You did beat to your own drum. So also, is that something you also had as a kid, that you always beat your own drum? But did you learn how important that decision-making process was?
I think that was definitely learned as I got into business. As a kid, there were certain things that happened, growing up that caused me to become basically an overachiever, and to show the world that I could do something. And some people over the years, people have joked, if you ever want Chris to do something, just tell him he can't. But those, it wasn't so much marching to my own drum. It was getting really clear on what I needed to do day by day, hour by hour, to achieve my goals. And I wasn't going to, I was going to do everything I could to block out any external things that would get in that way. And, going to, and it's not that I'm not a team player. Actually, I grew up playing team sports. I love being on teams and winning as a team. But if it wasn't contributing to helping me, achieve the goals that I had, then I would say, you know what, I'm not going to participate.
I'm gonna pass. Yeah. Well, I remember too, when you were asked to be on panels, you're like, yeah, what's the date? What's the time? Let me block that in. I had some prospecting time booked in, but I'll move it. Let me give enough notice. So I remember you would contribute and tell people how you did stuff. So it wasn't like you weren't a team player, but you definitely, for being in the mainstream of how many of the fish swam, you were swimming in a different stream and exceeding a lot of things. And finally people just went, well, leave him alone. He's kicking ass. I mean, why bucket, right?
Yeah, something must be working. But you're right. I mean, there is resistance. I remember at the end of my first year, and you can appreciate this because you came from the same industry. This was 1989. I hired an assistant, and back then real estate agents didn't have assistants, and all the agents in the office were like, first of all, I was younger than almost all of them, if not all of them. And they say, like, who do you think you are, hiring an assistant? Like, what are you, the president now? And I'd be like, well, you've been stuffing envelopes for 4 hours.
Right.
I'm going to pay someone to do that so I can go sell more houses.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so it was just applying, I like to think it was common sense. I don't know, business sense, whatever it was. It just made sense for me to do certain things and not do other things.
Well, you were a pioneer in that. And I know I want to come back from the break here because we got to jump on a break and talk about coaches, mentors, business development. I know that you're a big sponge in the early days, as I was, of personal development, coaches, taking process. And you were one of the people similar. I did similar as well. If I was going to get a coach or go to a program, I would assess what they'd say. I see if it had merit, even if it was different than what I would normally do. And I would implement it and try it and see if it worked. I wasn't afraid to implement taking risk. And you were one of those people. I mean, you had people guiding you because you asked for guidance and then you did the work. So I'd like to come back on this next segment and talk about how you first started incorporating mentoring or coaching or seeking somebody outside of yourself. And now in later years, we're also going to roll into how you have become a mentor and guide to many on your journey as well along the way. So everybody keep listening in here on the Alchemy of Business. We will be right back with Chris Heller. We're going to learn about how he went from real estate to CEO of one of the largest real estate companies in the country. And now he's a tech guru in some way as well. Let's find out about that. So we'll be right back. Thanks for listening in. Hello, and welcome back to the Alchemy of Business show. Thanks for listening in or viewing in, however you got here. We appreciate it. We have Mr. Chris Heller, who is a man of many talents. We've been talking about his early days of going from a rookie of the year to one of the top real estate agents in the country and his process in doing that. We're going to get into how he became in the CEO space, and now he went on to write books and various things. So we're going to come back, though, before the break, Chris. I know that you were talking about how crazy it was in the early days to hire an assistant as a real estate agent. And now it's kind of just par for the course, but you were a pioneer in that. And I know that you also were a pioneer in getting a coach where you had a real estate coach. Not only did you have a real estate coach, I think you evolved to then hiring personally one of the top real estate coaches in the country to coach you personally. So yeah. Can you share with me how you got into this specialized learning with understanding how to do your craft better at that time?
Yeah, I've always I'm learning based, and I'm always wanting to get better. In fact, Steve, I have a coach today, and I messaged him yesterday, and hey, I said, can you talk? Because we have a scheduled talk. So I still have a coach to this day. So that desire's always been there to learn more, to get better, to be able to do better. The first day that I heard that there was such thing as a business coach or a real estate coach, I hired him. It was like, I remember the day. It was in 1996, and I've had a coach ever since then. And sometimes I've had multiple coaches. And like, as you said, I became a coach for a while. So strong believer in coaching, mentoring. It's for me, it was like, I want to go somewhere. If someone can help me get there faster or not make as many mistakes as I normally would, why would I not want that help?
Right, right. Well, you were also very fit. You've also been pretty fit, lean, mean kind of guy. And if I remember, you were always pretty committed on disciplined workouts. So I looked at that as well. Many people have physical fitness trainers and they hire trainers at gyms, or the athletes. You look at Olympians. I mean, they have coaches to get them to the level. So when it started becoming coaching in business, I remember when real estate agents started doing that, like yourself. As I was a real estate manager, I hired a real estate coach when I was a manager. And I think I had my first coach when I was 27 or 20, no, maybe 28 or 29. And I also have a coach to this day. I've had a coach, every year for decades. And for me, coaching also gives me specific knowledge and accountability to what it is I said I was going to do. And it also gives me access to other people who are doing equal or more than what I'm doing, and a support group to have the ability, when you have stumbles and falls, of how to create some camaraderie and to get back on the horse. So did you have that similar experience?
Absolutely. I mean, there's, and you said it, I looked at the same thing. Like no one reached the top of their field without help, without a coach, right? Every Olympic athlete had coaches. Every professional athlete had coaches their whole life. And then as professionals, they still have coaches. So I wanted to get to the top. So I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that on my own. And whether it's the extra accountability, whether it's someone to voice ideas off of or bounce ideas off of, or someone that's just there that can help you when you're struggling or whatever it might be, by definition, a coach also is someone that can see things that you can't see, and to be able to point out those blind spots that may be holding you back or getting in the way.
Yeah, agreed. Well, you definitely were a pioneer for that for many. And so how did it feel when you went from being the rookie of the year, and then not only did you go on to become rookie of the year, but a few years later, you became one of the top 10 agents in the country. And at one point, I think you were even one or two internationally for the other franchise you worked for, Keller Williams. So like, not only the accolades of that, of being number one, but the monetary benefit of it. Like, do you remember when you made your first year of income of $1 million? Because I remember being the award giver on stages, and you'd be like, wow, this person's, and we'd always talk in sales volume or GCI, but still, that's a gross number you hit. And then it's about what you take home, the net. But what you were always smart about is many people were spending huge amounts on advertising. If I remember, your P&L for your business was very lean because you didn't do tons of advertising in the early days. You were muscle, machine, and calling. So I'm just curious how it felt when you were getting up and getting the accolades of your accomplishments every day, paying off that you're acknowledged for being the number 1 or number 10 or number 8 in the country, and your bank account is growing. How did that change your self-esteem? How did that change your view on life? How did that change anything that you can remember when it first started hitting some ways of, oh my God, this just actually happened?
Yeah, it's super interesting when I look back. Those things that happened, like the first year of making $1 million, I probably spent about as much time as I'm talking right now thinking about it, because and it was the same with the accolades and awards. We both worked for the same company for a while, and we had these annual awards things. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but I told him on multiple occasions, don't give me an award. Don't spend the money on it. Donate the money, or give me a dinner certificate, something I can consume, but don't spend hundreds of dollars on a trophy or a crystal this or that, because I throw them away. And I actually did. And because I didn't want to be thinking about what happened in the past. And every award you get is for something you did yesterday. And I was always forward focused. And I didn't want to rest on what I did yesterday, because that wasn't going to pay my bills tomorrow. So I've also been blessed and cursed with with never being satisfied. So, you know, there's that constant drive, and I've never been overconfident, that's for sure. And I always felt like I could do better, and there was a lot more that I could do. So and in fact, I'll tell you right now, I still don't think I've done my big thing. Like, there is more to come. And you know, there are some differences now. Back then, there was probably less enjoyment because I was so focused and driven that you know, my journey now feels much different than it did back then, but still have the same desires.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. And I do remember that now that you say that about the awards. Some agents would throw a fit that their award wasn't big enough. And yours was, I don't really need that. It's going to go in the trash. You should keep it. And you know, kind of thing. Do you think that is one of the books I just wrote in recent years is called Iggy Over Ego, or The Power of Iggy, inviting good in or inviting God in versus edging good out. So do you think that was also not resting on your laurels and not wanting to look on the past? Was that also a way for you partially keeping your ego in check, or did you not look at it in that way?
I mean, that may have been a byproduct of it, but I didn't look at it that way. It was more, I was so focused on building the discipline to do the things I needed to do that I was always fearful that anything like that might just be a chink in the armor, or the first chink in the armor. Like, if I rested on my laurels or celebrated too much, that would be the beginning of the end. And so I wanted to make sure that I didn't allow those things to happen.
Yeah. Well, you have a quote here that we found on one of your slides, doing the right thing, even when the right thing is hard to do. Noel, you've got that slide on 6. So is this something that was part of your motto from the early days, or did you have to grow into this?
I'm sure I grew into it. You know, we learn by our mistakes, and I'm fortunate enough that I made and make lots of mistakes, so I get to learn a lot. And there's certain ones that are really painful, and so you make sure you don't want to do it. So, you know, it didn't take long for me to figure out that, hey, I don't want to ever have to deal with that again. So I'm going to make sure I do the right thing, even if it means someone's going to be upset, even if it means I'm going to lose a sale, or, you know, whatever the situation is. It's the right path.
Yes. Doing the right thing. Well, and along your path, you've met some really interesting people. I mean, I know when you did start doing some marketing and you then had your team, you were one of those rare people that not only were you were the machine for so long that if Chris stepped out of the seat, sometimes the lead generation went down because you were the machine. But you were one of those people, not everyone can do this, that figured out how to keep their machine running by putting other key quality people in place. And your machine still to this day runs in San Diego at a very high level, and you're not out listing houses every day. I know that you're out running other companies and doing different things. And I know along the way, you brought in people like Barbara Corcoran on slide 4 here as an endorsement of Noel's pop-up slide 4 there. Barbara Corcoran, an icon kind of from the industry in New York, and then went on to be on Shark Tank and a lot of stuff. So when did you switch over this? Okay, I'm climbing the ladder. I'm number one. I've got this money that's happening. I also want to start forming my image in public perception or marketing and advertising. This kind of campaigns that you started doing, was it prepping for the transition to allow other ways to create business generation for your team to grow?
It was partially, yes. It was prepping for a transition of where I was going to be stepping out of the business. In 2008, I got a phone call from the CEO of Keller Williams and said, hey, you're going to be in Austin next week. When you do, I'd like to meet with you. I said, great, happy to. And he said, I'll tell you why. We have been thinking about expanding the company internationally. And we aren't quite ready to do it yet because we need to hit certain goals in North America first, but we're going to hit those goals. And we haven't done it because we've never had the right person. And we think you'd be the right person to do it. And if you're interested in that, I want to talk to you about that. I said, well, I can tell you right now, I'm interested. So I didn't even know what I was saying I was interested in. But I knew it sounded like a big challenge and a big
Well,
opportunity.
yeah, if the CEO of the largest real estate company in the country, I'm not sure how, but they were at that time, but they were in the top 3 or 4, if not number 1.
Yeah.
It calls you directly and says that, you definitely get your ears perked up, I would guess.
Yeah. So I knew then that I was going to have in the next year or two, I was going to not be able to spend the time I was spending on my real estate team. So I had to your point, I had to replace myself, and I was the main engine. And so that's when I started the marketing and radio and television ads to replace the business, bringing in the business that I knew that I wasn't going to be there to do. And to your point, here we are 12. I actually started that role in 2010. So it's, 12 years later, and my team in San Diego is still going and still selling lots of houses. But without me for the last, more than a decade.
Yeah, congratulations on that. That's not always common in the industry. Sometimes people are only as good as their last deal themselves, and they get up fearful every morning that they're not going to be able to keep their machine running. And you've done a beautiful job of transitioning that in. So kudos. We can all learn from that on how do you keep something that's been dear to you with sweat equity every day to get up and keep it moving forward, even in industries that doesn't seem like it's exactly set up to do it that way. Chris has done that himself and also taught many other people how to do that. And then Chris, from that, you was not only getting this call from Gary Keller and very much as himself, his own icon in the industry, you then not only went on to take that call, but over the years you went, and I remember when you made that transition, the guy that we both worked for at the time did not take that news very well. And I remember my own view as leadership at that time going, "Ooh, that's not how I think we should be handling this, burning bridges in that way." But you went on to take that role, and you went from being this helping them in a local level to then going to a national, international level. So how did you go from this stream of making telemarketing calls, building a team, staying focused, ready to go, boom, I'm going to go step into executive leadership and growth and at an international level? So let's talk about, that's a pretty big jump. So how did that come about, and how did you jump into that?
I didn't know anything about it. And I had been my own boss forever. So it was a big transition. I knew I had to learn, and there was no one at the company who was going to show me. That's why they were hiring me, because they said, "Hey, we need someone to figure it out, and that's your job to go figure it out." I had 2 years between when they first called me. It was actually Mark Willis, who was Gary's CEO for Gary's.
Mark, great guy, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I had 2 years to prepare. And so I prepared my team for stepping out, and then I started preparing myself. So I started doing tons of research on countries all over the world and how they did real estate there, and what the other brands who had already been international for a while, what they were doing, what was working, what wasn't working. And then the first year on the job, it was figuring out how we were going to do it. Like everything from legally how we were going to do it. So I hired the best international law firm I could find, and the best franchise attorney I could find, and created a master franchise document, and started to put the pieces in, and then started to focus on how are we going to do it, like from a training standpoint, how are we going to do it from a technology standpoint, how are we going to do all those things, what are we going to have to change in the company's models to be able to adapt to how things are done differently in all these different countries. So it was, looking back, I didn't spend any time, although there would be times late at night laying in bed where I'd be questioning, why do they think I can do this? Because I don't know that I can do this. Or
those thoughts leak in, those little pesky little minions in our head, right?
Yeah. And my wife at the time, my current wife, who was with me then, always said the right thing to restore my confidence and make sure I could get up the next day and go do what I needed to do to figure it out. But yeah, that was all new, Steve. It was a big transition, being an executive like that. And that wasn't a goal. Like I wasn't like, okay, I'm going to sell real estate for this year, and then I'm going to become the president of a company, then the CEO of a company. Like, I always had a knowing that I was always preparing myself for something more.
For the next thing, yes.
Yeah, for the next thing. But, that was it. And then then what happened during those 5 years, the things I did worked really well. And we started opening up countries all around the world. And then at the end of 5 years, there was a leadership transition, and they said, "Hey, we'd like you to become the CEO of the company." And so, but that I proved myself just the same way I got there to begin with. Was I got extraordinary results, as an ordinary person, and what I learned along the ways through my life, and still to this day, is the results create opportunities, and that's and those are the best type as far as I'm concerned, right? I wasn't asking for it, I wasn't pining for it, I wasn't trying to tear someone down to get to something. It was, hey, I'm going to do so much and such a good job that they're going to say, "Hey, we have an opportunity for you."
Yeah. And that's great advice for our listeners. I mean, to be able to have something that you figure out how to get really good at it, be your best that you can be in that thing, whether it's, let's say you're an administrator in a company, let's say you're a manager in a company, you're a salesperson in a company, you're an executive in the company, doing what you're supposed to do for that company and having phenomenal results and being tenacious and taking the skills that Chris is talking about. I mean, we all have imposter syndrome at some time. He was having those float into his head. Luckily, he had a supportive spouse or someone who could give him those, okay, you really can do this, or you are up for this. And then boom, you go back and hit it again. But just then getting results. And sometimes people want to go from A to T really fast. And it doesn't always work that way. I mean, getting these results, proving you can perform, driving revenue, and then people take notice. And it's also okay to, along the way, to give reporting progress reports on what you're doing, so the appropriate people know what you're accomplishing. But I mean, you went from, like you said, have no international presence to then boom. How much presence did you guys get internationally over like a 3 or 4 year period?
It was about that period of time. We opened up in over 20 countries around the world, and to this day, I'm whether it's on social media or whatever, I'm still being, and have friends that I made back then in Turkey and Portugal and South Africa and all over the world that are still running with the businesses that we helped them start.
I love that. Well, we're going to come back with Mr. Chris Heller. We have one last break here, and then we're coming back. We're going to dig into his path quickly as the CEO on that, but we're going to also then jump on this last segment into what he's doing now. We're going to talk about his new book, Dominant Thoughts, and we're going to talk about what he's doing in the tech world of artificial intelligence, connecting human connection in communication and real estate. So please come back and join us. We'll be right back. Hello, and welcome back to the Alchemy of Business show. Thank you for listening in or viewing in, however you got here. We appreciate it. We are talking with one of the top leaders in the country, not only in the real estate space, but also in the tech space. Mr. Chris Heller has been sharing his journey with us of his bumps and hurdles, but also his successes along the way, from going from sales into leadership. And we were wrapping up the conversation where, Chris, all of a sudden you've helped Keller Williams go international in 20 plus different countries. And all of a sudden then you're tapped on the shoulder to go, "Hey, you want to be the CEO?" So how was that conversation? And during that time you were CEO, what was it like, what you thought it would be? And then what was it not like, what you were expecting? So I'm curious on how I remember when I was on that path as well. It's like, oh, I wasn't quite expecting this, or didn't think I'd juggle through this, but hey, this is really cool. So I'm just curious, when you said yes, and you went, wow, I'm really at the top of the food chain, for somebody who said I'm never quite finished with achieving. That's a pretty big achievement. So how did you feel when that got accepted, it got announced, and then you were in the seat?
It was all a progression. Like there was, as I was building international, the owner of the company and then CEO and president would say things like, "Hey, this is going to be your office someday," or, "This is, you could be doing this." And like, there were these hints. And so it just felt like this natural progression. Once it happened, I was just so focused on doing a good job that I really wasn't thinking about, "Oh, wow, I'm the CEO." I was conscious of the CEO that I was replacing, was someone I looked up to a lot, and was a great leader and very charismatic. And so I was very conscious of not trying to be him, because I knew I couldn't and I wasn't, but just to be myself and to rely on the things that I knew that worked with me. And that a good decision, and it worked real well because the 150,000 at the time agents that we had really appreciated that, because I was, in a lot of ways, I was one of them, and now helping them, achieve their goals, which ultimately helped the company achieve its goals.
Yeah. Just being yourself and not trying to be somebody else. I think that's good advice for all of us. And you said that kind of like nonchalantly, 150,000 agents. I want everyone to hear that. That is a massive enterprise. And of course, Chris wasn't managing every one of those people every day, but his leadership style and connecting and making decisions and leading the company. And Chris, I think you had to get over your fear of speaking in front of groups by that point, hadn't you?
Yeah, fortunately, I had gotten over that many years earlier. Yeah, I mean, it's, when I think back about it, we had a couple of conferences where I spoke in front of like 19,000 agents, like in one room. That's like an arena.
It is, yeah. I remember seeing some pictures of you doing that. And I remember like when you were doing your thing, and I would think back and I would think of you with your headsets on in your telemarketing booth doing that. And I'm like, shit, this guy's now in front of thousands of people, like speaking to the audiences. And I never really knew for sure that you had an early speaking, a fear of speaking in front of groups, but you clearly overcame that. So your dominant thought somehow works. So I want to roll dominant thoughts in, but I want to come back to the Keller Williams thing for a minute after that. And then we're going to roll into another segment. But so you stayed on this path as CEO, one of the largest real estate companies in the country. And then this book that you just wrote, the reason I'm bringing it up now is because it had to have some play in your journey of being a CEO and all the stuff you had to maneuver there about controlling your dominant thoughts. But you recently just wrote a book. You co-published or wrote the book with a friend of mine, Greg Reed, who I've known for many, many years. Greg did a book series, 3 Feet from Gold. He's endorsed by the Think and Grow Rich Foundation. He's gone on to write 60 or 70 books. He's published, produced like 3 or 4 films, really a thought leader in his own right. But you wrote this book. He helped get some of the, I think, distribution or publishing done. But how did this come about? Dominant thoughts, your thoughts determine your results. Talk to us about why you did the book and what people will take away from it and where they can get it.
Yeah. Why I did it and what they can take away from it are sort of related. Early on, in my early 20s, I was, again, always looking to learn and grow. So I was reading a lot of books and still read a lot of books. And some of those books I read early on were business parables, stories. The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino, The Richest Man in Babylon, those type of books. And they really had an impact on me. I mean, I actually took things out of those books and like implemented them, and to this day have shaped who I am. So I knew if I ever wrote a book, I'd want it to be that type of book. Take all the lessons, weave it into a short story that that people could read and digest. And then I met Greg, and we were on a podcast together. And the host said, "Hey, Chris, when are you going to write a book?" And I said, I've thought about it, but I don't know. And I'd have to ask Greg how to do it because he's the pro. And 2 days later, Greg called me up and said, "I have a title, I have the URL, I have all the contacts. If you have the content, I'll show you how to do it." And I thought, wow, what an opportunity to have a mentor, with me on the journey of writing the first book. So
yeah, that's awesome.
And what it is, it's the lessons I've learned. Some of them I learned as the CEO, some of them I learned earlier in my career, but it's just taking those lessons that helped me achieve some of the things I've achieved, and then sharing those with others, hoping it has a similar impact.
Well, good. Well, I hope everyone will take it. We'll put this in the show notes in the link. If you're listening to this or viewing this, you can scroll down and look right here in the screen. You're going to find a link to Amazon. Chris has told us it's also on Audible. I know it's an action-packed book. It'll be a fairly easy read because he's kept it short, but meaty and impactful. Greg Reed also is someone who's probably given some good golden nuggets on this as well. So congrats on the book, Chris, and thanks for getting it done. And it's interesting, you were mentioning some of the books you mentioned earlier, and one of the ones I read earlier on, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. and putting out that mindset and what you attract, or Paulo Coelho, the alchemist, about, once your mind is made up, the universe conspires for your success. And you're a prime example of just dressing up, showing up, doing the work, and people noticing, and you attracting people, even that you're not out like soliciting or looking for them, whether it's a CEO role, a publisher for a book. So it's a great lesson of sometimes we don't know where things are going to come from. We don't know where they're going to show up. We just have to have faith that the world and the universe is conspiring towards success if we're doing our best and trying to live up to that quality, which I know that you do. So when you were on the CEO path, and I want to just take another minute on this because I want to jump into some other things we're doing, but you probably had to have some trying days of the good, bad, and ugly on the CEO of being this large operation. I know I found there was a lot of corporate politics at that level and a lot of different struggles. Sometimes there was more internally in the team stuff at the headquarters level than there was in managing the outside part of the company. So I'm curious on how your dominant thoughts worked in your favor, or you had to maneuver those skills while you were the CEO of Keller Williams.
Yeah, look, every company has its issues, right? And most companies are shinier on the outside than they are on the inside. Keller Williams is a great company. I learned a lot, but in every situation, you can learn what not to do as much as you learn what to do. And it got to a point where there was just some strong difference of opinions, some strong difference of core values of what was okay and what wasn't okay. And yeah, the last year prior to my leave was as bumpy as a year that I'd ever experienced. And and I left a company that I thought I'd never leave. I'd been there since 2004, and then you find yourself spending a lot of time with your thoughts and thinking about
exactly.
All right, now what? And what happened? What did I do that contributed to that? What should I have done? What will I do differently? What did I learn? All those thoughts.
Yes. Yeah. When we learn what not to do as much as what we want to do, and sometimes your dominant thoughts are, battling back and forth, but you got pretty clear on that pretty quickly, either A, because your phone started ringing, and I know you were offered other opportunities. You went on to do Mello stuff, the group with Mello, but now where you're focused on, and I want to take a couple minutes on this because this is your current passion project, and then we're going to jump into our Instagram stuff and then some other discussions on spirituality. But you're currently now the CEO and I believe an investor in Ojo Labs. And if I'm not mistaken, Ojo Labs is basically a connector. It's almost like a matchmaker in real estate space for connecting consumers that want specific types of people, skills, areas, processes. But you do it in a very seamless way, but you also are connecting human touch with AI. So is that a good assessment? And what is it you do within that company in your life right now with them?
Yeah. So, it's a company that I met while I was the CEO at Keller Williams. They were a startup company. When I left, I became an early investor and an advisor, ultimately became a board member. And then in the middle of 2019, they said, hey, we could really use you full time. And it was a good time, a right time for me to make a change. I'm actually the chief real estate officer. There is the founder, the founder is the CEO. And so we had to come up with a new title. But I help lead the company. We consider ourselves a marketplace where we have lots of consumers that find us on a website that we own called Movoto.com, which is the 5th largest website in the country for real estate. And we help those consumers wherever they are in their journey with a combination of machine learning and human interactions. And then if and when they need to be connected to a service provider, a real estate agent, or a loan officer, we make those introductions to make it a seamless path for that consumer to get what they need. I got, for the last several years, I've been very involved with the technology side of the real estate business. When I was at Keller Williams, it was out of necessity because we had to figure out a lot of things, and now it's just become something. I always like change. For someone who's been in the industry his whole life, I'm more of a, hey, let's figure out how to do it better, how to change it, versus let's keep it how it is.
Yeah. Well, it's great that you weren't intimidated by technology. A lot of times with people in real estate or traditional businesses, they're kind of like, oh, I don't want to learn that. But you've dived deep first, I mean, feet first in different tech companies, and you've learned. And I guess that just fits your personality style of, if I don't know something, I'm going to learn it. If it's going to help better me or someone around me, I'm going to learn it. So, and we can't deny that technology is changing our world and continuing to change it. And this artificial intelligence, AI stuff is part of pretty much anything we have right now. It's in our phones, it's in our health app, it's in real estate connections, it's in social media. So it's part of this experience. The key is how to help possibly on dominant thoughts with whoever the leaders are of those companies, make sure it's doing it for the right reasons and the right cause. So I'm sure you will keep that on track. And we have about 6 or 7 minutes here in the show, but I want to jump into a segment on that we like to do, kind of fun if you're up for it, called Instantly Interesting Instagram. So if you're up for it, we only have 3 little steps that we go through. And basically, we just took a quick dive, Chris, on your photos, some of your photos on Instagram feed. We then are going to pull them up, and some interesting ones we thought without any context from us. And then you're going to tell us what was happening at that time and place in that photo. And then you're going to just tell us real quick, like a lightning round on each of those photos. For those of you that are listening to this and you can't see it, I'm going to describe the photo, and then Chris is going to do the same. So you up for playing, Chris?
I'm up for playing. I guess this is why we tell people to be careful what they post on social media.
Right. We scoured and looked and found some fun things. So let's go, Noel, to the first one. So we have a slide here for instantly interesting Instagram. Starting the show. This is, if anybody remembers the Brady Bunch, where they had that photo where you were looking on the show and everyone was looking at each other in the boxes when the show started off. Well, here's one that says the Heller Bunch. And it's got a bunch of these cool photos of all kinds of different people. So tell us what was happening here. I'm assuming this was around the holidays, but tell us about this photo, Chris.
This was a holiday card, and we wanted to do something creative. So the team, the team came up with this idea and said, hey, we're going to, like you said, be a play on the Brady Bunch. So everyone on the team is in one of the boxes. I'm the one in the middle, and they're all looking at me. So, and everyone's wearing their holiday garb.
Yeah, everyone's got like either reindeer ears or candy cane ears or something like that. Chris he has on a red and green jacket. He doesn't have anything on his head, so he didn't quite go to the extreme of antlers, but he's looking holidayish. Okay,
hey,
what else?
That red and green jacket was a big stretch.
All right, next slide. So this looks to be something very impressive. This is a photo, and it says ACL Fest. And it looks like kind of a tech conference. There's a bunch of flags. I'm not sure where this is exactly. But what's this photo, Chris?
This is in Austin, Texas. This is about 2 blocks from where I live when I'm in Austin, where we live when I'm in Austin, when we're in Austin. And this is at the Austin City Limits Music Festival. And this is sort of, the sun's gone down. They had this cool area where they had all these colorful flags. And it was a picture that turned out really well.
Well, yeah, I've heard about this event. I've got to get to that. I've heard great things about it. Okay, Noel, do we have another slide?
Yep.
Okay, here is Chris with a fun laughing expression. It says 5 states, 8 CEO town halls, 3 days.
Yeah. So this is when I was at Loan Depot, is the second largest non-bank lender in the country. I was the CEO of the sister company. This is me and Anthony Shea, the founder, and we flew all over the country in 3 days, did 8 town hall meetings with Loan Depot and Mellohome team members all over the country. And every day or multiple times a day, we did these presentations. So it was a lot of fun.
Whirlwind. Well, he's an impressive leader in himself. We'll have to have you back on another show, because I really wanted to dig into your definition of leadership over the years, and we're just going to be running out of time. So that's a whole nother topic. But let's jump into another slide, Noel. Okay, this is Chris looking. He's in front of a room. He looks like he's teaching something, and there's a board behind him that has like a tic-tac-toe box, but like times 10. So what's going on here, Chris?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. This is on the island of St. Lucia. We have a call center there with about 450 people in the call center. And this was me when I first joined Ojo, going down to St. Lucia and talking to all of our great call center reps on the island of St. Lucia.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, Chris. It gave us a little context of some of the stuff you've done on your journeys. So thank you for playing with that. So I want to wrap up here and talk about, we've talked a lot about the power of dominant thoughts, tenacity, drive, learning what you don't know by having you're surrounded by other people that maybe have better skills or more accountability than you had in what you're doing, and not being afraid to ask for help. and really stepping into arenas of you have this ability to either, whether it was a forced transition or a chosen transition, you continue to evolve in new industries, new skills, new leadership. And then in this AI world of artificial intelligence, tapping into technology and trying to understand how that ecosystem works. I'm curious, in the last few minutes we have of the show, I'm always intrigued by AI as well, but I'm also intrigued by spiritual intelligence. And SQ, and you were big at Keller Williams with also personality surveys. Keller was really big about identifying people's personalities and having that connection of what makes somebody tick. So in your own life, I know you're a father and you're a husband, and you have this setting a good example. But what is your definition of spirituality, and how do you incorporate that into your daily life and work?
Yeah, that's a good question. One that certainly don't get asked a lot. We all have our own definitions, so it's appropriate to ask what mine is. Like having a relationship with yourself and with a higher being, whatever you want to call that higher being, and knowing that there's something beyond, what we're just doing here now. And there's certain things that happen in your life that either bring you closer or farther from that. I just recently, my mom passed away a few months ago, and we were all in San Diego, and she has 4 grandkids, my 4 kids and my brother's 2 kids. And it really hit me when we were there, and over the next few days, all the grandkids were together, and they were all telling stories about their grandmother and what they loved about her and what they learned and all those things. And it really hit me that, and I think most people know this, but sometimes things hit you in a way where it's like, really, really becomes obvious, as that, hey, we're going to be gone. And when we're gone, it's done. It's like instant, it's over. Everything we've had, everything we've done is meaninless, except for the impact that we've had on other people. And when I heard my kids and my nieces talking, and it really struck me that, hey, my mom, their grandmother, made a profound impact on their lives and what they've learned and things. And that's like, that's the journey. That's why we're here. And that's why I'm here. So for me, it's, how can I be the best person? How can I impact people that I work with, I work for, that work for me in a way where, hopefully it makes a difference that'll carry on.
Well, I love that. Yeah. And the power of our own legacies, of the impact we make on others. And that's a great note to end on. And you clearly, Chris, over the years and what you've done and your own leadership, even though sometimes you were keeping your blinders on, thinking you're just doing your thing, people were watching, people were experiencing, people were seeing, hey, this is possible, giving people hope, saying, hey, if he can do it, I can do it. Going on to overcome your obstacles and then going on to different companies and to businesses and to over your challenges. Obviously, your own inner strength of making this difference, of making an impact on people, which I also believe is a spiritual gift that we're all able to have if we recognize it. How can we make a difference in someone else's life today? How can you create a miracle in someone else's life today? Whether it's a smile, whether it's a hand up, whether it's offering them a job, whether it's a hug, whatever it might be, there are things that we can do in that. So I want to thank you for being on the show. I'm thrilled that you've written this book, Dominant Thoughts, because we all know that the power of our thoughts are what creates our destiny and impact our life and what we want to create. Chris's book, again, will be in the show notes that you can click on and get this on Amazon or Audible. And Chris, any closing thoughts for the guest?
Steve, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's been a great conversation. Love to do it again, talk about leadership or whatever else you want. And as far as the book goes, you can also go to the website, dominantthoughts.com, to learn more about it.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening in to the Alchemy of Business show. We will be back again talking more about making wiser decisions, finding ways to create greater profit and abundance in your life, and finding higher purpose in what you are here to do on this planet. Thanks for listening in.
And that concludes this episode of The Alchemy of Business with your host, Steve Rodgers. If you found value in today's broadcast, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing with friends, and leaving a review. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next Thursday for another episode. Be blessed and see you soon.